You're listening to Cash and Sass. I'm Lisa Marie, your go-to gal for all things money. As the Sassy Wealth Queen and the brains behind the Sassy Wealth Coach, I'm here to take you on a thrilling ride from the financial chaos to sassy and sexy money. Welcome back to another episode of Cash and Sass. My name is Lisa Marie, and I am the brains behind the Sassy Wealth Coach and this podcast, Cash and Sass. And of course, I am known as the Sassy Wealth Queen. And with me today, I have Liz Wolfe, and she is a business coach, author, and speaker who coaches entrepreneurs to get unstuck so they can launch and grow an abundant business. She got her entrepreneurial start growing up on a sheep farm. I have so many questions. In Western Pennsylvania with her mother and two sisters. She later moved to NYC, where she created a successful computer consulting business with her husband, John. And eventually she transitioned out of technology business to coach business owners to develop an abundance mindset, my favorite subject. She recently launched a quiz on her website that helps you figure out whether you're wired for business success. Liz says that one of her greatest accomplishments is staying married to her husband for 27 years while running a business with him. Once aspiring to be a rock star, she now runs multiple bluegrass jams in New York City. Okay, I, again, have so many questions. You grew up on a sheep farm and then ended up going into technology, and now you teach about abundance mindset, so which is my ultimate favorite conversation. And one of the things that you even talked about, though, in the forum is that money wasn't talked about growing up, that your father was very secretive. And, and you didn't know how to, okay, this shows mine and her age because I know what she means by balancing a checkbook. So for those of you that are younger than, 40 something, way back when we actually had checkbooks that we wrote checks and we had to balance them. And that was the first way of managing money. I am old enough to know. It shows my age. And that made me laugh. I was like, oh, there's someone else who remembers the balancing of a checkbook. And so I'd love to know, when you have that type of mindset and that secretiveness, especially with women, for us, it affects us in the way we think about things, especially money. It shapes us, right? It shapes our direction. How did that shape you at first when you started thinking about money?
Yeah, well, first of all, when I talk about growing up on the farm, the entrepreneurial part of money was about survival. It really wasn't about abundance. It was really about survival. This was like the 70s when there was the oil crisis and different things. And we paid like $1.09 a gallon for oil. At that time, it was like, woo, so much. Now you'd be like, yeah,
Well, Donnie paid $1.09. Yeah. I remember when gas was 89 cents, okay? And I fussed when it went up to $1.04, and I would give anything to pay $1.04. This was in the 80s for those that are too young to remember when it was 89 cents.
So the funny thing about that was my parents were divorced. So my dad worked for Westinghouse. He had this job for 43 years, which was a steady salary. But I was in my 20s or maybe even early 30s before I even knew how much money he made. It only was when I got to a certain point as being an adult child where you kind of have to know these things about your parents and what they got in their bank account and that sort of thing. And I remember seeing it and written out on a piece of paper. Now, he was very responsible with money, but it was a thing where he, for whatever reason, he did not ever sit us all down and say, okay, everybody, there's ballet lessons and there's school clothes. And by the way, I pay child support, $400 a month. And, there's this, and here's how much the apartment is. Nobody ever talked about that kind of stuff. And my mother had a whole other thing going on where she had what I would call a very common experience, which is even Steven. Money comes in, money goes out. Money comes in, money comes out. The baler would break at the exact same time. Somebody would give us $500 for something, and it would cost $500 to fix the baler. And so there was always this, I'm not really sure what's going on, at the same time that I saw this money, coming in and out, and it was my mother who never balanced a checkbook. She would write checks on. This is what you used to do. You used to call the bank and ask somebody, "How much money do I have in my checking account?" And then she would write checks on that, not take into consideration she might have written
Already
checks.
wrote a check, and that's
Yep,
because she wasn't balancing the checkbook, and you were
that's right.
you were going by the balance of what they told you, but they couldn't tell you how many checks you'd already written that
Yeah,
hadn't cleared yet. They
that's
were going to hit
right.
the bank tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this is the way in which poor people stay poor because they're hit with a lot of things like bounce checks, which, used to cost $10, but now it can be like 35 or $50 if you bounce a check and that kind of thing. So I really got to be a young adult without having any consciousness about keeping track of my money. In fact, I did this interesting workshop once about money. And one of the exercises that we did was you could take out any amount of money you wanted from 25 cents to whatever. Some people wrote checks. And there was a mingle and you exchanged money. There was really no discussion. It was just like, okay, here's a new person. How much you want to give them? And you exchanged money. And there were like 200 people in the room and we exchanged money. And of course, I ended up with no money after, I probably started with $20 and ended up with two or something. And a woman stood up and she shared and she said, well, I exchanged. And then after I made the first $50, I put that in my back pocket and then I kept exchanging. And I had this revelationary moment where I was like, you can do that. She said, she had the saving mentality that I just didn't have at all. And I was like, oh, and she said, I still had money to play with, but I put that $50. So she walked away with $50 in her back pocket. She didn't lose money. So there were just so many things I just didn't know anything about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it affects you though, right? It affects how you look at life and how you pay your bills or how it affects the relationship you have with money. The relationship you have with the idea of being able to create wealth. Um, I tell people all the time, I didn't come from wealth. And for a long time, I was told if you don't marry, you didn't come from it, you don't marry into it, you're not going to ever have it. And
Mm.
I had that belief and mentality for years, and I did not come from it, nor did I ever marry into it. And, you know, what I'm so passionate about is being able to show women that you don't have to come from it in order to create, retain, and expand the wealth. You can create your own. And part of what I teach and what I preach on and talk about on the podcast and with my clients and on my lives and all of that is, being wealthy is so much more than just having money. To me, being wealthy is having wealth in all the places, which is the reason why I created the 5 wealth codes. And the 5 wealth codes are spiritual, mental, physical, energetic, and financial. And they all intertwine with each other because when we take care of ourselves and we have all of those 5 codes aligned with our core values and our desires, then we're wealthy because we're living life on our terms and we're creating and we're retaining and expanding the wealth aligned with our core values and desires and what we're wanting. And
Yeah.
I actually had a conversation with someone earlier it's going to go live on all our live streams. And we were talking about it. And I said, one of my passions, one of my desires, one of my core values is to make an impact. Right. And
Yeah.
so, okay, is what I'm doing aligned with that, And way back when I had that scarcity mindset because it was taught to me, it was shown to me, it was never spoken to me. Money was nothing we talked about. It was one
Right.
of those taboo subjects that we didn't discuss in front of kids, and it wasn't discussed. Um, and I had to learn on my own. And by the time I learned on my own, I'm like you, Liz, I didn't know. I I tried. I could balance it, but the thing. But I would always end up messing it up. Okay. It never failed because you'd punch a number wrong and then there end up being white out. And then I'd get mad and I'm OCD. So I'd rip it out and have to start over. Do you know how messy that checkbook ended up being and how wrong it ended up being for Mint too?
Yeah.
And, then we switched to, debit cards. And that just made life even worse because when you went to debit cards, you were swiping and you weren't thinking about it. And we became even more, what's the word, nonchalant, bearing our head, not knowing where our money was going. And society just kept teaching us that, right? And we have the concept of, oh, we have money because we got this plastic card. And no, that is not what that means.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that, just like me, you had to do something to shift that belief. And I think it's important for my listeners to understand that, at some point in time, a lot of us have that belief. And it's not our fault necessarily that we had that belief. It's on the fact that it was taught to us or it was around society. However, we have control over shifting it. And I think that's really important. And so how did it affect you, having those type of things besides, not being able to do it? Like into adult life, when did you start realizing, hey, I can shift this? And what did it take for you to do that?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I hit rock bottom. I had, after college, I opened a little shop, and the little shop was in Connecticut. And the purpose of it was to sell some of the products that we had on the farm, which, by the way, by the time I was in my 20s, was a fairly significant selection of offerings of sheepskin slippers and coats, and we sold lamb. So, if we had that farm now with social media and reels and, you see all this, whole other story. So, but this, the shop, excuse me, did not do well, mostly because my heart really wasn't in it. It was really my mother's thing, not really mine. And I was trying to save the farm. And I did make some money with it. But anyway, I decided to move to New York City. So I moved to New York City, still, pretty much broke, got a job for $14,000 a year, which was $1,000 less than a job I was offered. But actually, even then I had enough scruples. No, I'm not going to go work in some big, horrible New York City thing. And I ended up with a room that only cost me $176 a month. So I was managing, but that's what many, many of us do with our world and our finances, which is we're managing. But in an unconscious way, I wasn't managing my money. I was just paycheck to paycheck kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time at which I was just faced with the reality that I did not have any money left in the bank, and I didn't have the thing about being an entrepreneur is you can create money, but when you have a job, and again, today I would go do Postmates or something, but then there was like nothing that I could do to generate money. And I really needed in those days, you needed a subway token to get on the subway. And I did not have any, and I could not go to work without money or a subway token. And I dug through every pocket of my coats and pants, and I found a subway token, one subway token. And I remember this rush of relief coming over me because I could go to work the next day. And that's when I realized, okay, this is crazy. As cold as I ever was growing up, because we didn't have money to buy oil, or as hard as I ever worked, or as, embarrassed as I ever was with what we used to call flood pants, because the pants were, not too, you grew out of them, that kind of stuff. To be an adult, a functioning adult, living on your own and digging through the pockets of your clothing to find a single token so you could go to work, just fell over me like, okay, this is not working. I need to figure out. And that's when I created my very first spreadsheet with my very first budget. And I laid it out, and it was necessity. And I figured out I only going to have $30 at the end of the week. That's all I can spend for spending money. I watched it and I did it in ways my mother never did.
Yeah, and I call that the money roadmap. And a lot of people find budgeting restrictive. And yes, at first it can be, especially if you're living like the way you're talking about. But the reason why I call it money roadmap is because if you notice what she said, she watched it, and when she put all things down, she knew where her money was going and how much she had left. So it gave her power to decide where she wanted that $30 to go. Did she want 15 to go into a savings account? Did Jen only spend 15? Did she want to use 30 of it to go out to eat? She had the power to decide because she knew what was going on with her numbers. And I could preach about this until the day I die because I'm just that passionate about it. It's not restrictive. It gives you the power to make decisions. And, the reason why some budgets don't work is because they're so cookie cutter and they're not specific and they don't include all the things. And the reason why I call it a money roadmap is because when you think of a roadmap or a GPS, what happens when there's an accident or, I don't know, construction or whatever? What does the GPS do? It redirects you. You have to tweak you have to tweak the direction you're going. You have to tweak your roadmap, right? So money roadmap is the same thing because so many people think budgets are set in stone.
That's true.
No, they have to be tweaked because life happens. And so I call it a money roadmap because I want people to realize, a money roadmap, this is giving you information so that like Liz said, where the money's going, how much you've got left, and you can decide where you're wanting it to go and how you want to do. And you can see this aligned with your desires. And this is whether business or personal. I mean, I have a roadmap for my business and my personal, and and I can see everything. And then I decide where the money's going. How much am I putting here? How much am I putting there? Where am I putting it? And it's just, I love the fact that you use that, saying that you created it because, okay, I don't want to be digging in the pockets. I need to know exactly how much money I have. Where's it going? So that I can make sure that I have this coins. And so probably what you did is you put into that budget whatever it costs to get those coins because that's where the mishap was, the money leak is she didn't have the money to get those coins because she'd overspent, but she done that because she didn't know what was going on with her money and where it was going. And I just think that's really, really important because they don't have to be restrictive unless we let them be restrictive. They're to give us the information and then it's what we do with it that actually matters, right? And
Yeah.
how did you start shifting that mindset though to abundance?
Well, the real change in that came actually because I did have that survival experience of growing up on the farm. What that gave me that I think other people didn't have, and why I've always been an entrepreneur, even when I had a job, I eventually became an entrepreneur, freelance, is the fact that when my kids were in like first grade or whatever, in the New York City public schools, parents are expected to volunteer.
Oh, Lord.
And so because that, you got to have your kids have the best of everything, right? So one of the things they did was they had fundraising. And I forget, maybe somebody needed that or something. And I went to the meeting and I said, well, because I have this kind of scrappy background of learning how to create money from nothing, which you can't do when you have a job. You can't create money from nothing. You have to wait for a bonus. But when you're an entrepreneur, hey, right now I'm doing this, but in an hour I can go over there and I can start pursuing some of my prospects and come up with something to sell or something. So I had this entrepreneurial mindset around fundraising and I just got into it because I thought it would be fun to get to know parents and things. And it turned out I was really good at it. But we were talking very big numbers here. I mean, these people are raising $500,000 for the school in a year. The auction alone would raise like $100,000.
Wow.
So that's a lot of what financial shifting your mindset is hanging around bigger numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean spending bigger numbers. I don't mean spending bigger numbers, but getting used to a bigger, that's what it took because the PTA hired assistant teachers for every classroom in that school, 2 classrooms per grade, K through 5. That's a lot of money. It was like 20 grand each teacher a year or something. So we had to raise all this money. And I noticed that I was very good at it. And then I started to say, well, I can actually create money. And of course, by then I had started my business with my husband and, which turned out computer consulting is actually a lucrative business. So I think that's another thing is finding a space. I think many of us, especially as entrepreneurs, spend a lot of time in this, scarce space, even as you're generating money, because you're like, it seems hard. It's hard to generate money. And so we really want to get better at how we're selling, how we're talking about our business, how you're marketing yourself, or even advocating for yourself. If those people listening are working in jobs, advocating for yourself. I have a friend who worked at a job for 15 years and didn't get a raise. Well, if you're sitting around waiting for them to get you a raise, they're not going to do it. You got to advocate for yourself to do that. So, and so many ways, especially women, where we don't think we're qualified or we think we're an imposter or doing any of those things. So it was really getting involved with groups that were also raising and having a lot of money.
So what is one of the things that you would tell my listeners, like as a step, um, that could help them shift from that scarcity mindset to abundance? I know I have some steps, but I'm interested to hear what you would share because, I mean, being honest, I mean, not all of us are going to be able to go around and hang around that, that kind of type of thing. So what's a shift that I was talking to somebody earlier. It's like often women, especially, we have this block around how much we can, um, the potential we have, the type of money we can make. So often we don't, see beyond a certain number. And a lot of times it's because of that scarcity. And so I'm interested just to hear what's a couple of steps that you would recommend, um, excuse me, um, for listeners to take to shift that mindset, right? To begin to shift it, because I want them to be able to walk away, with some ideas. And again, I have them, and I think it's important for someone who also teaches abundance mindset and who works with people to teach abundance mindset for you to also hear their suggestions. And here's why: there's more than one way. I'm just going to say it. There's more than one way to skin a cat. You heard that phrase, right?
Yeah.
What that phrase means is there's more than one way to do something. Because there is. My way is not the only way, and it's not the only correct way, and neither is Liz, and neither is the people I've interviewed before. It's what works for you. And I'm also going to say that some of the suggestions that me and Liz may have, and I'll say it again, I say this almost on every episode I do. Every new level brings a new devil. And what that means is every time you up level, you are going to have it. And I think it's even more so from especially the ones who came from struggle. Okay. I was on food stamps when I started my business, and I heard you'll never get off of food stamps that you got on them, because I had to get on them right before I started my business. I heard I wasn't gonna make the money. I heard I would never get off the food stamps. Well, they don't know me, and when you tell me I'm never gonna do something, whether it's bad or good, I'm gonna end up doing it because you told me I would never do it. It's just that, a lot of times it's that grit and determination, not necessarily a good way to go about doing it, but it's the grit and determination. And every new level brings a new devil. So that person who thinks they're protecting you because you're about to up level, they're saying, oh, see, these aren't working. These aren't working. And so that's when you have to dig into that toolbox. And so I think it's really important for you to have more than just a couple of things. And so That's why I'm asking this is what sort of steps, what are things that they can do to shift that mindset and help them also when they're in that new devil coming up, to bring them back to that abundance anytime, that scarcity tries to creep in.
Yeah. Well, one thing a saying that I've heard from Wayne Dyer, if you're not familiar with him, he's worth looking up, Wayne Dyer. And he says, abundance is not what you acquire, it is what you tune into. And what I want everybody to know is that on some level, you are actually repelling, rejecting, conditionally receiving abundance. You may say, oh, yes, I want $1 million. But when somebody says, hey, do you want this, battered up car? And you're like, I don't want a battered up car. I need a car, but I don't want that battered up car, that kind of thing. So here are the steps that I tell people, my three, I call them keys, but there are 3 keys or 3 steps that you can do to create an abundant business and life. And I'll say what they are first, and I'll give you a little information about each one. So the first one is to ask powerfully. Second is to give wholeheartedly. And the third one is to receive graciously. So I will say that we have learned that the way to become wealthy and to have abundance in the culture says you have to work really hard, you get the right connections, be some sort of a respected expert, or like you are, you either have to come from money or you have to marry into money, right? So if I didn't come from money and didn't marry into money, if I don't have those good connections, if I'm working really hard, but I'm not seeing that, or if I'm just starting out, then I feel like I sink into that abundance mindset because they're outside of the realm of your control. You cannot control. I mean, I guess you can control who you marry, but you can't control that did or didn't come from money. Actually, one guy once said to me, if you want to marry a rich person, hang around rich people. No joke. Okay, back to ask, give, and receive. So the thing about all those other things is you don't have control over them, actually. Like, what if you go to a networking event and you make a connection and the guy never reaches back? Whatever. So the 3 things you do have control over are these 3 actions. So first of all, you take a look in your life to say, where am I not asking? And that can be anywhere from not asking for a raise, or not getting more money from your client, or not asking for help, or not asking even for, it could be anything really. So I have a whole weekend workshop on this, just on these 3 things. So I'm just going to encapsulate it by saying we were taught that asking in general is rude and weak. You are weak if you ask. So the irony is that any person that is out there in the world that has something of what they want, they probably asked for it. It doesn't just, things don't randomly come to you. This is why I own 5 ukuleles and 3 guitars, because I asked for them when it was my birthday. That's what I wanted. So I asked for them. Okay. So when I say powerfully, I mean be specific about what you want. So many of us are like way too loosey-goosey in our vision, or we don't really know. You want to pick a number. You want to say a number. I can't tell you how many people I do a coaching session with. Well, I'll say, how much money do you want to make? And they have no idea. They haven't even thought about it. So you want to be specific, and you want to be asking the universe, and not some nebulous, I want to be joyful. Like, I want to know the number. Okay. That's asking powerfully. Now, you often say, and I almost mistakenly said, well, after you ask, the next thing is for you to receive. But actually, when you ask, you have to think of it like you put an order in on the internet. It's not going to show up at your doorstep immediately. Okay. You don't place an order on Amazon and then go run at the door. Although obviously in today's day and age, sometimes they deliver it in an hour. But we don't want you standing at the door going, well, where is it? Well, where is it?
Right.
Well, where is it? Well, where is it? So what the next action you take is you begin to look around and say, where can I give what it is that I want to receive? So that could be giving time, that could be giving money, that could be giving referrals, that could be giving, supporting other people. And when I say wholeheartedly, I mean it like genuinely. Okay. And then the third thing is to receive graciously. And I just want everybody listening to know that receiving, we all receive very conditionally. And that even though you say, I want money, you actually are repelling money in many, many ways. So the graciously part comes about because it is with gratitude that you're receiving. And if you do those three things, then those are my steps.
I love that though, because showing the gratitude is something I talk about. So it's showing gratitude when we spend money, showing gratitude towards the money that you have. Because when you do that, you're opening up to, the universe that you want more, right? And that it goes back to what you focus on, you create more of. And I think that's just really, really important. You have a free offer for my listeners. Can you please tell them what that is about, or what it is and what it's about, and how they can go and get it? And we will also make sure that all of this is in the show notes, just for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I do have a quiz that is on my website, lizwolfecoaching.com. And in case you didn't get the joke, yes, I grew up on a sheep farm and my last name is Wolf. So
yes, I caught the joke. Like I said, I had so many questions.
So lizwolfecoaching.com, although that's wolf with an E, /quiz, or if you just go to my website, it pops up. And so whether you are an entrepreneur or not, it really helps you to understand your leadership style. And when you go on, then once you do this quiz, it's a fun personality quiz. And then you get a lot of materials that will tell you exactly what your strengths and weaknesses are as a leader. So I would love for you to be able to take that quiz.
Awesome. I love that. And I want to thank you very much for being on the show, because this has been, awesome, because again, it shows that there are different ways of shifting your mindset. There are different tools that you can use. There's different ways to think of things. And if you've noticed, she and I have a lot of insight, and we basically say the same thing. We just say it differently. And her tips may be slightly different, but you notice that with that very last one, it's the gratitude. And I just think it's really important to have all aspects of it, because what may not have landed one time on another episode landed just now. And that's what I'm wanting. I'm wanting the aha moments to land with you, my listeners, my sassy friends, and just go, oh, okay, I can do that. That makes sense. And when that light bulb goes off and you do something about it, that's when the shifts are going to start. And so, I want you to just think about that as you're listening, and maybe go back and re-listen with that type of mindset as well. And Liz, thank you so much for being here and sharing graciously your story, and about you being on a sheep farm, and, the checkbook still gets me. And just how you were able to shift that mindset to abundance, and how you now have a loving relationship with money, which I absolutely love, because I do too. And I started from we had a really bad hate relationship for years, and now we don't. And I just think it's really important that we share that. So thank you very much for being here with us today. And my friends, remember, until next time, stay sassy. Bye. Thanks for joining us this week on Cash and Sass. Check us out on social media and on our website at www.thesassywealthcoach.com, where you can download my free Money Story Start Guide. The website again is www.thesassywealthcoach.com. And as always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode, and leave us a review so we can continue to bring you fresh content. And remember, yes, it is possible to have sassy and sexy money. See you next week.